Hey everyone, Stephen from InFolk here, and here today to give you a quick walkthrough and demonstration about our InFolk Four Dimensions Organizational Health Assessment tool. And so we're going to walk you through how this works from beginning to end, starting with when you create a new account with InFolk. If you go to infolk.co, you can sign up for a new account. And the first thing you're going to see is this screen where you get to purchase a new assessment, and it'll walk you through all the steps of paying for that assessment. And then you actually create an invitation for members of your organization to go and take the assessment. The assessment will take them anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how much depth they want to go into and some of the qualitative questions at the end. But you send it to them, and as soon as you get started and send an invitation to take that, you'll, as the account owner, the account administrator, you'll see this screen, which allows you to be able to look and to see who has this gone out to, who's completed the assessment, who hasn't. We find that often following up directly with people, if they're being a little slow to finish the assessment, is a good idea. But then once the assessment is finished, you've gotten all the responses that you want, or all the assessment responses you think you're going to get. You can actually just click to close it. And we give you warnings when you do this, because once you close a report, it's done. We actually take all that data that has been submitted by your employees, we send it to our AI tool for processing, and we actually create your report, and it's finalized. So I'm going to switch tabs here, and you'll see this is an organization that has completed an assessment. Now you'll see over here, you can still purchase a new assessment. The way we envision this tool being used over time with organizations is that each assessment that you do in the four dimensions gives you a snapshot in time of what the organization is experiencing and going through. But we know that that's going to change. Every organization is always in flux, always in change. New employees are coming in, other employees are leaving. The organization itself is going through ups and downs in different seasons. And so this will allow you over time to get an idea of where is your organization in that season in time, and how could you be intentional about leading the organization towards greater health. And the way we think about health of an organization is centered around what we call the four dimensions of organizational health. There are two personal or people dimensions of the four dimensions of an organization. That's leadership. It's those who have decision-making authority or responsibility for a company to move it forward, to accomplish its goals, to set the culture of an organization and what that organization is like. But there's also employees. There's people who work in the organization. That's the talent. So those are the two people dimensions, leadership and talent. And then there are two structural or systems dimensions of every organization. There's culture, and then there's strategy. And when we think about health, we're talking about calibrating tensions that are present in each of those dimensions. There's two dynamics going on. For leadership, for example, you're balancing the dynamic of being authoritative, of making decisions and making your decisions known in the organization and leading forward towards a particular strategy or outcome. But you're also balancing that with vulnerability, the need to delegate responsibility to other people, the need to be honest in communication and how you talk to employees about what's going on, how you navigate risk. All of those are the vulnerability that leaders feel. And again, each of these dimensions has its own unique dynamics that we want to hold in tension and where we can get out of balance. And as we're out of balance or leaning too much one way or the other, we're going to experience that in particular ways in our organization. So let's dive in, and I'll show you a little bit about the results and what we get from a report like this. So once all of the assessments have been submitted by the employees and this report is generated, you can come in and you instantly have this. We started what we call the behavior tab. So we ask people a series of questions where we ask quantitative measurements about their experience in the organization, questions related to leadership, talent, culture, and strategy. And they rate these things on a scale of 1 to 7. And for each of these ratings, we put all these together and we combine them together to get a score. Each question is related to a dynamic of authority or vulnerability or ambition or humility, one of the dynamics that are going on in these many dimensions. And so what we do with this initial screen is just give you an overview. Here's how your employees are experiencing the organization. And in each of these, we plot them on a 2x2 with one dynamic being on one axis and then the other dynamic being on the other. And then we can move to see, are people experiencing more of one or the other, or is there kind of a balance between the two? Each of these individual dots represents the score or the result for an individual employee. So when you aggregate them all together, you end up with this big circle, and some of the circles are smaller. This is standard deviation. So how tightly woven together are the answers that you're getting from employees about leadership. So you can see here between leadership and talent, there's a slightly larger circle. You can see this outlier down here dragging that standard deviation out a little bit more. So it's harder to say with certainty. We don't want to pinpoint and say your organization is here definitively. We're trying to aggregate together the experiences of a lot of different people about their experience of the organization in these different dimensions. So we're trying to give you a sense of it's somewhere in this area, like you're experiencing more thriving than maybe destroying. And again, there's a lot of language to this. I'm not going to go into to understanding the four dimensions. There's a lot of depth in this framework for understanding how it applies to organizations, and we try to apply that to you contextually. There's more that you can read and experience, and we're available if you have questions or if something doesn't make sense. One of our consultants are glad to walk through that with you to explain how the four dimensions works and how what this information actually means for your organization. But this information is here for you contextually. If you ever have a question, what is authority? What is vulnerability? All that's here in help and contextual help if you just click the little information button here. So this is a very high level when we see the graphs, the plottings in each of the four dimensions for the overall results. And then this is one of the unique things about our product is we take these results and we send them to a custom tuned and a custom trained large language model, AI model, that gives us actual an analysis that's custom and unique for every single assessment that we do. So this model has an understanding of the four dimensions and how it works. So it can actually take these results and give you an amazing in-depth explanation for your organization of what these results actually mean in plain English. So we see here the results summary. We always want to look at alignment. We're able to parse out when we send these assessments out, we're able to parse out the responses of leadership and the responses of the rest of the employees or staff so that we can know, is there alignment or misalignment between the leader's experience of the organization and the employee's experience of the organization. That's really important. And then in every tab, we give you some strengths and potential strengths and potential weaknesses based on, again, this is the overall tab, and then some recommendations, some things for you to consider as next steps. Now, with each one of these tabs, we start with an overview, and then you can dive deeper into each dimension. So I'll just click here so you can see what this looks like for the behavior tab. If you dive into leadership, what you can now begin to see is we'll show you here are the responses of staff as it relates. Here's their vulnerability and authority scores and the deviation among staff members. You can see, again, bigger the circle, wider the deviation, the bigger range in answers. Same with leadership. For all the leaders who answered, it's going to be the same thing. And you can kind of see visually here, we're giving you a visual representation of how people are experiencing the leaders, the collective action that sets strategy, shapes culture, and drives execution in your organization. How are people experiencing that? Is it more authoritative? Are the leaders leaning more into authority, or are they leaning more into vulnerability, or are they doing a good job of balancing? You can see in this organization, there's a pretty good balance right now at this point in time. And you can dig in deeper and, again, get more information specifically about the leadership dimension. What are the results summarized? What's the alignment, the difference in perceptions between leaders and staff, just about leadership? And what are strengths and weaknesses and recommendations? And again, you can dig deeper on each one of these dimensions: leadership, talent, culture, and strategy. Going on to the next tab, we want to take the same data and we want to look at it from a slightly different angle. Again, in this quantitative section, employees are answering questions on a scale of 1 to 7. So we begin by aggregating those together and giving you just the raw score and behavior. But we also recognize that the way we've structured these questions is that these results, these answers that people are giving are either positive, they're maybe neutral in the middle, or they're negative. So we can actually give what we call the employee promoter score or employee engagement score, which is simply taking all of the negative responses, subtracting them from the positive, and leaving you with a net number. So this scale can show you results of your organization in terms of sentiment, all the way from negative 100, which is all negative, no positive, all the way over to positive 100, which is all positive and no negative, or what is more likely somewhere in between. So this is just, again, just a different way of looking at this data to say, in general, what's the sentiment of people in our organization as it relates to each of the four dimensions: the leadership, the talent, culture, and the strategy. And again, we'll give you a results summary generated by AI for each assessment that we do, along with an analysis of the alignment between leaders and staff in that, again, overall, and then in each dimension, as well as strengths and weaknesses and some recommendations. And then, as you see, as you can dive in, I'll jump to this one here where we can say, what's the difference between the leader's perception, or actually, I think there's a little bit more gap over here on talent. So, yeah, here, if you look, the sentiment about the leaders towards the employees in this organization is more negative than the employees about their coworkers. So that's interesting, right? Like, so what does that mean? Well, we give you some ideas. Here's where there's differences. Here's some potential strengths and weaknesses and some recommendations, which includes closing that gap. Like, why is there a difference in perception on these things? Next, on the assessment, we ask people in general, not about the specific organization you're working in now, but what do you value when it relates to leaders in an organization you work for, or coworkers? When it comes to culture or strategy, what are your preferences? And when we put all those preferences together, you would expect that value would actually drive behavior, because what we value as human beings should be in line with what the way that we behave. Isn't always, and when it's not, we want to ask questions. Why is that? And so this gives us an opportunity to say, when we look at the values in an organization, and in these questions, we force people to choose one way or another. When it comes to leadership, do you prefer authoritative leaders, or more vulnerable leaders? And when you put all that together, you get an overall preference for what employees in the organization prefer. And you can see these always tip, and there's a range. So again, wider the range, the more disparity there is in answers. So we see here pretty tight alignment with a desire for more authoritative leaders than vulnerable leaders in this organization. But in strategy, a bit more of a wider frame, like more disparity in answers, but again, more preference for flexibility than focus in this organization. And the same thing is true. We'll dive in maybe a little bit where there's some disparity here. Let's look at strategy. And here we can see leaders have a strong value for flexibility. This would be a very entrepreneurial culture where there's a high degree of value for high flexibility. Whereas employees, they want a little bit more focus, maybe a little bit clearer plans, a little bit clearer set of goals and objectives. And again, this is where the results, we can take this information about the values of the organization, begin to say, what does that mean? Feed that into AI and get some suggestions, some recommendations. Where is their alignment? What are some strengths? What are some weaknesses? What are some next step recommendations? And then the next tab is our environmental tab, where we ask people, out of a set of 50 characteristics for an organization, we ask which of these 10 best describes the work environment that you're currently in. And how would you rate those? What do you think are the most clear or important characteristics for this organization? And we see that staff has one list, leadership has another list, and then there's what's in common. Again, this is kind of like the environment of working in an organization. What's it like to work there? And you begin to look at these things and ask, are leaders and employees on the same page? And where they are on the same page, as we begin to think about the organization, who's going to fit best and thrive best in this kind of environment, and who's going to struggle? We can start to be purposeful about how we think about hiring and how we think about performance improvement for our employees. So that's the environmental profile. Same thing here. We feed these results to AI. We get custom results around alignment. What are the strengths and weaknesses for each one? And then where do we go from there? And then finally, this is pretty great. We take the qualitative responses from all employees and we put them together. This is the great thing about AI. It can take large amounts of written data and it can condense it together to create a summary, some strengths and weaknesses related on the actual qualitative feedback from employees, and then recommendations. And we ask specific questions in the qualitative about leadership, about talent, about culture, about strategy. So we get, again, qualitative input from each employee. So that's a quick overview of the InFolk four-dimensional assessment product and how it works. If you have questions, we'd love to talk to you. Feel free to email us at info at infolk.co, and we would be glad to schedule a time to walk through and answer any specific questions or show you more about the product that we weren't able to go through in this short demo. Thanks.